Hello, welcome to Sound and Fury Book Reviews. As usual, I am Tina. Today I'm reviewing The City of Dusk by Tara Sim, which comes out in March 2022, and it's a fantasy from Orbit. So I received this arc from NetGalley in exchange for a fair review, so thank you Orbit for the e-arc. I really enjoyed it. So The City of Dusk is a diversity-fronted fantasy with multiple main characters, a plot that weaves as much as it diverts, and it has a thrilling conclusion. It's worth the rather slow start, I would say. So what is it about? The four realms, life, death, light, and darkness, all converge on the City of Dusk. For each realm there is a god, and for each god there is an heir. But the gods have withdrawn their favor from the once vibrant, thriving city, and without it the realms are dying. Unwilling to stand by and watch the destruction, the four heirs, Risha, a necromancer struggling to keep the peace, Angelica, an elementalist with eyes set on the throne, Tasia, a shadow-wielding rogue with rebellion in her heart, and Nick, a soldier who struggles to see the light, will sacrifice everything to save the city. But their defiance will cost them dearly. So I liken this book to an old car, one with a carburetor. And like an old car on a cold winter's morning, this book takes a while to heat up, but when it does, it goes full on Grand National. To get the critique out of the way, yes, the book starts off quite slow. Around 30%, I was looking at the percentages left on my tablet and it was like, I'm kind of bored. Should I just set it aside? But I don't like not finishing arcs, especially because, I like to keep my NetGalley nice and clean. But I'm glad that I powered through because the second half is really, really fun and I couldn't put the last 40% down. So there you go. The reason for the slow start, I think, is because there are 5 main characters and several supporting ones, as well as the new world, magic, and political system to explain to the reader. Because I was reading an ebook, I couldn't easily flip to the character list at the start, so I found I couldn't remember everyone's name, house, magic, power, etc., it wasn't frustrating, but I was kind of like, I feel like I'm missing something because I couldn't remember anything. Eventually, I started to learn, and by that point, the action picked up. In the end, it actually wasn't too many characters. I really liked the multiple POVs because each of them has this distinct story or personal arc that's interwoven with the other 3 or 4. Unfortunately, another thing that held me back at the first bit was that I had trouble with the world building itself. We aren't really shown the day-to-day workings of the city. The 4 main characters just seem to run around all day, but given their ages, early to mid-20s, I think, I would have assumed they had to do more governing or learning to govern or something. I just wasn't sure how the government functioned. I also didn't understand how, what the climate was in the city. Not climate like political climate, but like the actual climate of the weather. Given this is a fantasy, I would have assumed that they would have been eating more like seasonal food because they don't have, sea cans carting things from around the world. So it just seemed like there were things that they were eating. I can't even remember now what they were, but there were things I was like, would they be eating this in the fall? Wasn't this something that grows in the tropics? Anyway, I wasn't really sure kind of where the city takes place. I mean, it is a fantasy world, so I kind of, eventually I kind of forgot about that. But I was, at the start, I was kind of like, it held me back a bit because I was having trouble kind of figuring out what the deal of the world was. I wasn't sure what the gods had to gain from this whole world dying thing either. That wasn't really clear for me. Anyway, maybe that will be cleared up in later books. So while these details seem like a lot, they didn't really matter once I hit about 40%. I just kind of accepted this and kind of moved on and got more involved in the story itself. The book also, in terms of the writing, I really enjoyed the writing, actually. I thought it moved quickly and I liked the pace. I liked the kind of the dialogue and stuff like that. I just found the book had some weird similes that didn't really work, that could have been just trimmed out. They just felt a bit kind of pithy and they weren't needed. So this is a political fantasy novel without the politics, if that makes any sense. But what it lacks in political intrigue and intricacy, it evens this out by not having all those annoying bullshit backstabbing that often takes place in books with a heavy focus on ruling and politics. In this novel, the older generation are involved in maneuvering, but the younger people are friends. They like one another. They don't want to backstab one another, and most of them aren't really interested in becoming a ruler. This gave the story an interesting dynamic that also helped make the characters more relatable and likable. The motivations for each character felt personal on a deeper level than I want to rule. The stakes were adequately high to my liking, because I always am I'm always wondering, especially with books like that, I'm like, so you want to rule, but what then? What else do you want in your life? It feels like a flat. That's kind of why I've never really, while I read Game of Thrones a lot when I was a teenager, I was probably 15 or so, I loved them, but as an adult, I'm kind of but what else do you want aside from that? What do you do after? I just don't understand the point. I liked that this book did not focus on that. So all the characters were interesting, albeit I felt like they were a bit young at times. I would have preferred characters in their late 20s or early 30s, but then again, I'm in my mid 30s, so maybe that's why. So the characters, we have Nick, the emotionally abused and grieving boy who isn't good enough for his dad. We have Risha, the competent and loyal necromancer. Angelica, who can't control her powers and feels like a failure. And Tessia, I think that's how you say her name. She's basically the badass. There's also this hunter cop guy named Julian, who is the classic tough guy with the heart of gold and the ailing mother. He was a bit tropey, but I liked him. I liked all the characters, actually. They had enough depth that I understood their motivations, and they served their purpose in the story, and I liked following them around. I didn't dislike any of them. I'm not a reader who loves to hate characters. I prefer to have characters that I like. I don't really like when there's characters that are deliberately frustrating or annoying or like jerks, I don't particularly like those kind of characters. I like characters that I actually like. So all of these people have magic derived from their gods. There are creatures in this book, but not dragons or anything like that. And there are these horn-headed people who take refuge in the city, though they exist more on like the periphery of the story. Magic, while it is a major part of the story, isn't like the main focus. We aren't really told how it functions or what the rules are for using it. This didn't really bug me. I just accepted that. I just accept magic as magic. I don't really need like a complex rule system unless it's like something really intricate. So people who like a magic system that is very precise and follows like logical rules and things like that probably will find this aspect frustrating, but it didn't bother me because I really don't care. I will say I didn't realize going into this that it was part one of a trilogy. So it ends in a way that doesn't feel entirely satisfactory. While the main conflict is resolved, it clearly sets up for more. And at almost 600 pages, that was kind of annoying. But I should have expected it. We don't get fantasy one-offs anymore. Apparently, everything has to be a trilogy or a series, which is why I don't read a ton of fantasy, because you think I have time to read 1,200 pages of fantasy when I still have to finish Proust? Like, come on, guys. Like, come on. Anyway, overall, City of Dusk was a dark but not grisly fantasy that started off as a bit of an arduous uphill race, but the second half was a thrilling rush to the finish line. All right, I completed the metaphor. Though I guess it's more of a triathlon than a race, but whatever. So if I had to give this book stars, I usually don't do this, but I think I want to clarify here. I would give it a 3.5, but it gets bonus points for Tessia's humor because there's a quote. I mean, it's from the arc, so it might change, but I'm just going to say it anyway. So her brother says, "All this sincerity creeps me out. Your face creeps me out." Tessia replies, and I thought that was funny because that's definitely something you would say to a sibling. Yeah. She's got the quips. No one else really has quips in this story. She's got these kind of little silly things she does that are fun and entertaining. The book also has bonus points for a sexy sword fight with amazing sexual attention. It had me going like, whoo, that was a great scene. It has a wonderfully normalized LGBTQ plus representation and casual diversity. I love that these things are as they should be, just normal things that have no bearing on how we're treated in society. They should just be accepted, and that's how they are in this book, and I really liked that. The book also has this line: Nicholas didn't want glory or prowess. He didn't want to lead or be considered an expert in anything. He had never been ambitious or particularly determined. He wanted quiet and solitude and maybe a dog. Yeah, I feel you, Nick. So to wrap up, this book reminded me of this indie book that I really like called Up to the Throne by T.A. Frost, which I recommend. That one is more of an Italian Renaissance-based fantasy, but it also has fantasy races in it. This book reminded me of that a lot for some reason. But yeah, so if you read City of Dusk and you liked it, I think you should read that. If you've read Up to the Throne, I'm not sure because it's an indie book and it doesn't have a million ratings on Amazon. You would like The City of Dusk, I think. And if you haven't read either, I recommend both. And I'll probably read the second book, probably the third one if the second one's good, though I say that there's never enough hours in the day. Anyway, thanks for watching, and thank you again to Orbit for the e-arc. I really enjoyed it.